ESPN senior baseball writer on the line right now. Jay, how are you?
Pete, what's happening, man? I'm good.
Not too much. Mike's on vacation, but I'm filling in for him. Let's talk about the Chase Utley trade to the Dodgers. Let's go back to Wednesday, I believe it was, in the dugout. And really, Ruben Amaro Jr. tells Philly radio that Utley's going to remain a Philly. And then all of a sudden, he becomes a Dodger. So how did Chase Utley become a Dodger?
Well, that's a good question there, man. I was in that dugout on Tuesday when Ruben said that, and it was surprising to me because I'd been in touch with several of the teams that were interested in Chase, and they were telling me they were pretty sure he was going to get traded. They were just frustrated that it was taking so long, and so I don't think we'll ever know exactly what Ruben was up to by saying it was very likely that he wasn't going anywhere, but I know that he did not say he was going to stop talking to other teams after that day. And in checking with some of those teams, he did not stop talking. He kept going, obviously. And I think it was a way of applying pressure to both the Dodgers and to Chase and say, I think I can talk him into it to the Dodgers if you're willing to throw in this, and to tell Chase, this is the place you said you would want to be. I've got a deal I like. It's good for the Phillies. It's good for you. Let's make it happen. What do you think? And that's my guess about how it went down, but it was still odd to have Ruben say so forcefully that it was likely that Chase was staying and pretty much hang it on him and saying he was a guy who didn't want to go and never did want to go.
Was this about first, let me ask you this. Was this a wise move for the Dodgers? I know the Phillies kicked in about $4 million, but they did give up two prospects. One of them is going to be with the team tonight in Miami. Was this a wise move for the Dodgers?
I've heard from a lot of Dodger fans since they made this trade, and you know what they all said? We didn't need a second baseman.
Right.
We needed pitching. So that's a good question. In the short term, it makes a lot of sense. Howie Kendrick's out probably for a few more weeks. They don't have to rush him. Chase obviously has played with the shortstop a little bit, so that won't be an adjustment. He's from L.A. He loves hitting in that park. There's a lot of things to like about it. But in the big picture, it's a team that's got bullpen issues. Their bullpen has a 6 ERA over July and August. And think about this, too. Since May the 12th, so this is 3 months of work, when Clayton Kershaw and Zach Greinke starts, they are 8 games over 500. When anyone else starts, they're 10 games under 500. So I think you could argue they still need another starting pitcher, too. So I don't think that's precluded them from doing anything else, but I wouldn't say it addressed their primary needs, right? And then the one more thing that's going to be really interesting is what happens when Howie Kendrick gets back. I wouldn't want to be Don Mattingly trying to figure out who to play at second, who to play in left, who to play in right. There's a lot of decisions on the manager's plate that he doesn't need.
And I'm glad you mentioned Dodger fans because the Dodgers and the Phillies kind of have a history making these trades with kind of, I don't want to say over-the-hill guys, but I mean when you bring up guys like Michael Young and Roberto Hernandez last year and Victorino in the past, the Dodgers and the Phillies kind of have a history making these type deals.
Well, different management now running the Dodgers.
Right.
But, look, Andrew Friedman tried to get Chase last winter before he traded for Howie Kendrick, and so he's had long-standing interest in this player. And the way Chase played after he came off the DL reignited that interest. So I understand the connection. I don't know that this is the same as those other deals. One thing to watch, too, is Howie Kendrick's a free agent after this year. Chase is a free agent after this year. I'm sure in Chase's mind, this is not just an opportunity to get himself into a race. It's an opportunity to audition to be the second baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers next year.
ESPN senior baseball writer Jayson Stark on for the Stark Report, powered by Team Nissan in Vineland, the spot where the checkered flags drop. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too. Did Chase Utley kind of play himself out of Philadelphia? Because if he comes off the DL and he kind of continues to struggle below 200, does he remain a Philly?
That's a really difficult question to answer. Look, I know that even when he was on the DL as I was calling around before the trading deadline, I came across some teams that were definitely intrigued by him. I kind of looked at him as a lottery ticket who, if he even showed he was healthy, they might be willing to buy. Now, I think that because of the way he played, they were able to get a better prospect return. I don't think it was impossible for them to have traded him if he hadn't hit 500. There was definite interest. He just had to show he was healthy, but he showed more than that.
Now, I'm not sure if you had a chance to see the press conference or be in attendance at the presser, but was that really kind of a perfect goodbye for Chase Utley? I mean, he doesn't really get the standing ovation with full attendance. He kind of gets to do the conservative tip of the cap, and then off he goes down the steps. Was that kind of a perfect, typical Chase Utley goodbye for you?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. They were hoping that they could get the deal done during the game so they could announce it, have him go out there, tip his cap, and do it in a have like a little more emotional goodbye, a real goodbye. What eventually happened with those fans behind the dugout kind of realizing what was going on and having it happen so organically, that was cool, but it was very understated. I felt like at the press conference, by Chase's standards, he was actually kind of emotional. You could see that I think his time in Philadelphia genuinely meant something to him. And, you never know what the guy's thinking or feeling because he never really shows it. So that was one of those moments that was especially revealing, I thought, even though it was all very understated, just the way he'd want it to be.
Jayson Stark, ESPN senior baseball writer, with me right now, 97.3 ESPN-FM. Let's talk about that really 5-year run of Chase Utley, really when he started to play every day, about 2005 to 2010. Was he on a Hall of Fame path, in your opinion?
Well, there's no doubt that he was, and you still see some people arguing even now that he's a Hall of Famer. I think he is not quite a Hall of Famer for me, and I always try to make the point that is not an insult. There are a lot of great players who were not quite Hall of Famers, and there's a kind of an irony to this because Don Mattingly is going to be Chase's manager in L.A., and I think there's some similarities there where Don Mattingly was on a Hall of Fame track, and then just because he couldn't get on the field and he wasn't 100%, he kind of spun off that track and never quite made it back on. And that for me is Chase. Now, you can make a case if you use wins above replacement and factor in defense and base running and compare him to other second basemen over a 10-year period, that he's got a case. I think he'll hang around the ballot for a long time. But I just think that what's happened since the 2009 World Series ended is probably going to keep him short. It's hard for me to predict what the voters are going to do, but I think he's a not quite.
And I mean, everyone knows about his qualities, his work ethic, his pregame routine, the scouting reports, the film study. Were those qualities, though? I mean, did he kind of just do himself in, just beating himself up for those 5 or 6 year run? Did that really kind of do him in the end?
That's another question that's really hard to answer. I think that in general, he played too much baseball. I don't know if he prepared too hard or immersed himself in it too much, but Charlie Manuel was a big believer in the concept of the everyday player. I've heard Charlie talk about this 1,000 times. There are certain guys, the special players, who are everyday players, and if you're an everyday player, Charlie was going to actually literally play you every day. And Chase was one of several guys in that team who, every year would play 150, 155, 158 games. And, it was a good match of manager and player because the player never wanted to take a day off and the manager never wanted to give him a day off. And I think in retrospect that was a mistake. And then, especially after he started having the knee and hip issues, I can't remember which year this was where he sat out for like 2 months and then came back, and this was the deal. Chase, his agent, Ruben and Charlie had a meeting when Chase came back and said, we need to ease him in. He needs to play 3 days in a row, have a day off, maybe 4 days in a row, have a day off. He needs to be off a couple days a week. Well, next thing I knew, he played 62 of the last 63 games that year, right?
Yeah.
And so this was the kind of thing that I think was Chase's undoing more than just all the preparation.
Well, and you go back to last season, too, Jay. I mean, he's 35, and he's still churning out 155 games, 660 plate appearances.
Well, the manager just did not. Ryan Sandberg just didn't know how to handle Chase.
Right.
Didn't know how, and a lot of different levels. Just couldn't. I mean, we can get into this a little bit. The differences between Pete Mackanin and Ryan Sandberg, and you're seeing it now with how he's handling Ryan Howard. But Chase would just will himself into the lineup and didn't have a real connection with the manager, and so the manager just kept playing him. And it was a mistake. You could see it in the way he wore down as that year went on. And I still think, I've told the Dodgers people that this week, if you play him 5 days a week, you'll have a hell of a player. If you play him 7 days a week, he'll wear down or he'll break down.
Jayson Stark on for the Stark Report, powered by Team Nissan in Vineland, the spot where the checkered flags drop. How about the job the front office has done, going back to when they traded Jimmy Rollins, when they first kind of ripped the Band-Aid off? I mean, that farm system all of a sudden looks a lot different. How about the front office and really the job done by Ruben Amaro Jr. With all of these trades? I mean, Utley, Rollins, Papelbon. How about the job that the front office has done?
Well, Pete, yesterday I was the guest host on the Baseball Tonight podcast. Very entertaining listening. If anybody's interested in downloading it, I had Ryan Lawrence on from the Philadelphia Daily News. We talk about Chase, and I had Keith Law on, who's our scouting guru, right? And so I asked Keith, where does the Phillies system rank now after all these trades, really 6 trades going back to last winter with Bird and Rollins? And he said, and this really surprised me, he thinks they're now a top 10 system in the sport. And they've been a bottom 5 system for quite a few years. So I think it's safe to say that they did well. I think that's more a tribute to the depth of prospects that they brought in, as opposed to the potential stars. I mean, that still to me is going to be the problem. I don't see a top of the rotation starter really anywhere in the system right now, and that's got to be addressed in the draft next year. And you can see J.P. Crawford has a chance to be a star. Maikel Franco has a chance to be a star. Now you got a number of useful players. Darnell Sweeney, the guy they got for Utley, who's now in the big leagues. He's at least an intriguing guy in terms of talent. They've got a lot of players like that. But, I mean, of all these guys that they brought back, I think the only player with star potential is Alfaro, the catcher that they got in the Hamels deal, and he's hurt. But if he maxes out what he can be in terms of power, arm, and infuses that with catching ability, then they really did well in those deals. I think you have to hand it to them. And the other thing is, I think this is a direct reflection of Andy MacPhail's presence, is they included money in every single trade.
I was just going to ask you that, yeah.
In order to get prospects back. And that's never been Ruben's stance. And so I really think that came probably from Andy, and certainly at least from Andy and Pat Gillick.
Well, and that's something that, going back to the press conference when MacPhail was introduced, John Middleton, I mean, he made sure to come out and say that, look, whatever you need, whatever resource you need. And looking at these deals, I mean, they kicked in a lot of cash considerations, they call it, and also taking on the contract of Matt Harrison from the Rangers. So how much of it was crucial in the part that Middleton has played in this?
Yeah, I think that's another good point, Pete, because John Middleton, has clearly set a different tone. And I think he recognized and communicated this. They have money. What they don't have, or what they didn't have, was players. Right? What they didn't have was talent. And so they have to use their money in whatever creative way they can in order to infuse this major league team and this system with whatever talent they they can add. And this is the way it works in this day and age. If you're willing to add money to these deals, you get better players back. And that was the philosophy they took, and it makes a lot of sense. Now, beyond this year, this is really interesting. They've only got 3 players under contract now. Obviously, they're not going to pick up Cliff Lee's option, so the only 3 left, but people can't even name them. Ryan Howard's 1, obviously. Carlos Ruiz is 2, obviously. And the third is Matt Harrison.
Oh, Matt Harrison, right in front of my nose, yeah.
Back from Texas. But, I mean, they're, all of a sudden, they've only got about a little over $50 million committed for next season. Of all their arbitration guys, I mean, the only one who could possibly make any money is Freddie Galvis, and he's not going to make a lot. So they have tremendous flexibility in using money to make themselves better. And so I don't think this will be one of those years where they'll be the highest bidder on the stars in the free agent market. But, you can use that money to fill in gaps. I'm sure they will. And you can use it on the international market, which I'm sure they will. And you can use it the way they used it over the last few weeks, which is if you find a taker for one of your players and you're willing to help pay down the money, that is another way to make your dollars work for you. So they've done a good job of that.
2 more for Jayson Stark, ESPN senior baseball writer. The Stark Report, powered by Team Nissan in Vineland. So is that time frame right from Pat Gillick when he originally said 2017 we could look to be competitive again? When you talk about the payroll flexibility and some of the guys in their minor league system, is 2017 a fair estimate in your opinion, Jay?
Well, it's more reasonable now than it was when he said it. I tell people who would ask me, all right, when are they going to be good again? I would always say, it's like asking me, what's the weather today at the Grand Canyon? Can't see it from here. But now you can at least see pieces in place, right? I mean, I don't know who the first baseman of the future is going to be, but Cesar Hernandez sure looks like the second baseman. They've got options at short. We know who the third baseman is. J.P. Crawford gets here probably sometime next year at short, so they'll be set at those 3 positions. They've got catchers now in their system. I don't know how fast Alfaro comes along, but they've got, I would say, 3 catchers now in their system who people project to be big league starters, and that's a switch. And it's the outfield they're really going to have to sort out. But there are some options now too, thanks to these trades. Again, look, Pete, what they need are difference makers. You look at the kind of guys that the Nationals have in their system. You look at the pitchers the Mets have already. I mean, they're going to run a rotation out there of 5 guys who are no worse than number 2 starters. The Phillies don't have anybody who's a number 2 starter. So they've got a lot of work to do, but at least they've laid a foundation now to get back and be competitive, and they didn't have that foundation a month ago, and certainly not 12 months ago.
Good points by Jayson Stark, ESPN senior baseball writer. The Stark Report right here on 97.3 ESPN. Last one for you. Let's talk about job security. Ruben Amaro Jr. and Pete Mackanin, have those guys done enough to come back next season? Who has the best chance of coming back next season, Jay?
Boy, really hard to know exactly what Andy McPhail is thinking. I would say that if I were going to bet on this in Vegas, I would probably bet on neither of them being back. But, if I were going to pick one, I think I might even pick Pete Mackanin. Now, it's probably not going to happen, but, one of their people made this point to me, and it's kind of stuck in my head. This was a team that was on pace to lose 110 games when he took over. And they play pretty decent baseball now. And the guys who are playing it are the guys who are going to be here next year, for the most part, right? And if Pete Mackanin has been able to connect with this group and get this much out of this group, are you sure you want to change? Now, I think their whole philosophy is going to be to try to get younger in many ways, younger in the front office, younger in the coaching staff, probably younger in manager and GM. But I think all of this stuff is in play right now, and the future of both these guys is in play because Andy McPhail is still in evaluation mode. Now, I know that Andy that's done a lot of back channel talking with people he knows in the sport about guys who could be potential GMs. I haven't heard a lot of manager talk because I think that might be the GM's call. So the fact that he's having those conversations tells me it's not likely that Ruben is back, and I think even Ruben would think it's not likely. But again, we're really trying to guess the thinking of a guy who hasn't let us in any way to know what he's thinking. Right? You have not seen Andy McPhail quoted about anything since his opening press conference. I hung around his office for 20 minutes one day and got a little insight into how he thinks, but he made it pretty clear even that day he was going to keep his cards to the vest, and he didn't even know how he was going to play those cards, even if he wasn't. So we'll know a lot more in 2.5 months than we know right now.
All right, Jayson Stark, ESPN senior baseball writer. It's the Stark Report, powered by Team Nissan in Violin, the spot where the checkered flags drop. Jay, have a good weekend.
Pete, you too, man. Good to talk to you.
All right.